Hey guys, it's Buddha Gem, your favorite anarchist here on YouTube, and lately I've been coming across a number of videos critical of anarchism made by people who are clearly not familiar with anarchism, its theory, its proponents, its history of class struggle, and I want to chime in on that. I'm thinking of two users in particular, Variablast and MenoftheInfinite, who have made recent videos about anarchism. So here's a clip of MenoftheInfinite from his recent video, Anarchism.
So I'll begin by looking at some of the major problems of anarchism as they occur to my mind. The first, and something that defines anarchism, is its opposition to what it calls the state. The state, commonly, is the cause of all the problems in the world. But what is the state? Anarchists will often define it as something like a ruling body that initiates violence against others. But the anarchist isn't fully clear about this. Their idea of the state is purposely kept very vague for the reason, I presume, to maintain it against all reason and all opposition, in much the same way that Christians keep their God as ill-defined as possible.
There's a lot of confusion wrapped up in those statements there. So let me try to unravel it a bit. Anarchists oppose all forms of hierarchical authority. However, we've spent most of our time and energy over the last 200 years, say, opposing two main forms of hierarchical authority, the state and capitalism. Now, what I find most interesting here is that MenoftheInfinite pretends that the state is some nebulous concept invented by anarchists. It's been written extensively by bourgeois theorists like Max Weber. And of course, anarchists themselves have written extensively about the state. And so in that vein, let me just quote Errico Malatesta, a famous Italian anarchist, when he says, "Anarchists have used the word state, and still do, to mean the sum total of the political, legislative, judiciary, military, and financial institutions through which the management of their own affairs, the control over their personal behavior, the responsibility for their personal safety are taken away from the people and entrusted to others who, by usurpation or delegation, are vested with the power to make laws for everything and everybody, and to oblige the people to observe them, if need be, by the use of collective force." And he goes on, and I will have links in the sidebar where you can learn more if you're interested. But the state is essentially marked by three things: a monopoly of violence in a given territorial area, this violence having a professional or institutional nature, and third, a hierarchical nature, centralization of power, and initiative into the hands of a few. Furthermore, it should be pointed out that anarchists don't ascribe all problems in the world to the state. It's pretty naive of MenoftheInfinite to claim such. I've also made other videos that have made this point, that opposition to the state is not sufficient to be an anarchist. That is, anarchism is much more than anti-statism. Like I said, it is in opposition to all forms of hierarchical authority. The state being one of those forms, capitalism, patriarchy, I mean, we can run down the list. But the fact remains that anarchists have been very clear over the years of what they mean by the state. There's extensive literature on this. And I would hope that those who wish to criticize anarchism or anarchists would at least take the time to maybe look into that literature to make proper and real criticism. His next observation is as follows.
Secondly, is the issue of centralization. Now, centralization is something essential for the functioning of all complex organisms. Take the human body, for example. Each human body is a colony of cells, with different cells being specialised for different tasks. They're all linked in various ways through things like the blood, hormones, and the nervous system. And the brain is the central processing unit, which makes decisions which impact on all other parts of the body. Without this centralised organisation and control, a complex organism has much less chance of survival. In war strategy, if you can remove or diminish the central control of your opponent, the battle is virtually won at that point. Now, anarchism has this huge problem with regard to centralised control, because if they have it, it'll essentially be no different to a democracy at best, and if they don't have it, then they won't be able to function effectively in a harsh and competitive world.
Granted, this is not a very sophisticated argument. The analogy with our biology is rather ridiculous in deciding how we are going to form political and economic institutions that serve our needs. However, I still would like to address the issue of centralization and start by reminding people that centralization is not just coordination, unification, or cooperation. Centralization, democratic or otherwise, means that everything is run from a center. A minority is in charge. As Paul Goodman put it, in a centralized enterprise, authority is top-down. Information is gathered from below in the field and is processed to be usable by those above. Decisions are made in headquarters, and policy, schedule, and standard procedure are transmitted downward by a chain of command. This system was devised to discipline armies, to keep records, collect taxes, and perform bureaucratic functions, and for mass production. Now, that doesn't mean that anarchists are blanketly opposed to centralization. To be sure, an anarchist federation also has a degree of centralization. That is, specific bodies and individuals are assigned specific tasks by the whole membership. These central groups are elected and recallable at any time with a rotation of tasks among members. By definition, a federation balances centralization with decentralization, with among anarchists only as much centralization as is absolutely needed and as much decentralization as is maximally possible. So anarchists are really looking for a balance and trying to bring power down to the lowest levels so that people who are most intimately familiar with the problems and have the most information are in a position to effect change. Running with his misperception of anarchist opposition to all forms of centralization, MenoftheInfinite goes on to make even more absurd claims. Go ahead and check these out.
The rest of the problems I'll address arise as a direct result of this lack of centralised control. Justice is something that I would expect to be a nightmare in an anarchist society. Every street could have its own separate law, and you'd never know what their law was. You could walk down the street next to yours, and they could shoot you dead for not wearing the right hat, or for not wearing a hat at all. And there's pretty much nothing you could do about it.
I'm running out of time here, so let me just point out, I've actually addressed the thing with the fire department. This is actually the state of affairs in the United States in the 19th century, where you had privatized firefighters, and if you didn't have the right agreement with the right firefighting company, and they were the first to show up to your house, say as it's blazing on fire, they would actually put a bucket on top of the fire hydrant and sit on it and watch your house burn. Certainly that, 19th century America was not anarchist in any sense of the imagination. It was a privatization. It's something we've seen again and again when we privatize certain services in this country and around the world. And without getting into all the other things, justice and the healthcare thing, let me just point out a more general criticism of this video and other videos I've seen like it. Nowhere once in the video do you see a quote of any great anarchist thinker, no reference to any piece of anarchist literature or the real live examples of anarchism in the world, like the Spanish Revolution, like the kibbutz in Israel, like the Paris Commune, or real living institutions like the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. Nowhere do you see references to any of these things. It's these very vague and ambiguous statements of, well, anarchists say and anarchists believe. Well, where do you get these ideas from? The truth is that MenoftheInfinite doesn't know a thing about anarchism, and that's fine. I don't want MenoftheInfinite to be an anarchist. I'm not here to convert people to anarchism. And I welcome healthy, real, constructive criticism. But I find that sorely lacking in this video and in Variabla's recent videos on anarchism. You have to know something about the topic in order to really criticize it. And having a few casual conversations with people who may self-identify as anarchists doesn't cut it. Lastly, MenoftheInfinite's most ridiculous assertion about anarchists.
So I think it's fair to say that they don't want to be part of a democracy. They don't believe in democracy.
Now, take about 2 seconds to peruse my channel and see that I've done an entire series on democracy, 7 videos so far, advocating democracy. I believe in it. Anarchists believe in it. Anarchists have written extensively about it.